The night was supposed to be magical. An exclusive charity gala under the stars, the city skyline glowing in the distance, and the who's who of high society in attendance. Everyone was there. Everyone. Except the one person who mattered most to Scarlet Reed. Scarlet, 6 months pregnant and glowing in a champagne-colored silk gown, arrived at the rooftop gala alone. She tried to smile, tried to ignore the stares, the hushed whispers. But deep inside, something felt off. Her husband, tech billionaire Landon Reed, had promised he'd meet her there. He had texted her just an hour before. "Be there in 30. Can't wait to show you off, babe." But that was the last she heard from him. As she walked through the crystal-lit terrace, her hand instinctively resting on her belly, Scarlet caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. Nervous eyes, flawless makeup hiding the exhaustion of a complicated pregnancy, and a brave smile that was beginning to crack. That's when the photographers turned. The click of cameras was rapid, aggressive, like a warning. At first, Scarlet assumed it was for her. But the crowd wasn't looking at her. They were staring at the grand glass elevator that had just opened. Out stepped Landon Reed, arm in arm with a stunning woman in a blood-red dress. Scarlet froze. The woman was tall, with dark curls that cascaded over bare shoulders, and a laugh that echoed across the rooftop like a gunshot. She was half Scarlet's age and clung to Landon like a trophy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Scarlet stood in stunned silence as her husband kissed the woman on the cheek and led her past Scarlet without so much as a glance. He walked right by her, like she didn't exist. Her breath caught in her throat, her fingers trembling as she tightened them around her clutch. One of the guests, a woman she'd once considered a friend, leaned toward another and whispered, "Isn't that his wife, the pregnant one?" Scarlet turned away before she could hear the response. Her vision blurred. Her heels felt unsteady. Her baby kicked, as if sensing her mother's distress. She staggered back, trying to catch her breath. But the pressure in her chest was too much. The betrayal, the public humiliation. The realization that the man she loved had chosen this moment, this night, to parade his mistress like a crown. Suddenly, the world tilted. Scarlet collapsed. Screams erupted. The waiter dropped his tray of glasses. People rushed to her side, and the music screeched to a halt. Someone shouted, "Call an ambulance." Scarlet's body trembled on the cold marble floor. She clutched her stomach, her face contorted in pain. "My baby, help, my baby." As the paramedics arrived and surrounded her, Scarlet drifted in and out of consciousness. She could hear voices, but couldn't focus on any of them. Her dress was soaked, her legs weak. Her baby? Was she losing her baby? Where was Landon? Was he rushing to her side? Was he pushing through the crowd, shouting her name, grabbing her hand? No, he wasn't. Because Landon was still standing near the champagne tower, watching. His mistress leaned in and whispered something in his ear. He smirked and turned away. He didn't run to Scarlet. He didn't kneel beside her. He didn't even pretend to care. Later, the security footage would show that Landon walked away just before the ambulance arrived. He left through the service elevator, left his pregnant wife in critical condition, alone. Inside the speeding ambulance, Scarlet gritted her teeth against the pain. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. "Please," she whispered. "Please, save my baby." The paramedic, a woman named Eliza, squeezed Scarlet's hand. "You're strong. Stay with me just a little longer." Scarlet blinked back tears. Her body was failing her. Her heart was broken. But something inside her refused to give up. This wasn't how her story would end. She had built Landon's empire beside him, helped write his first pitch decks, slept on an air mattress in their old apartment while he coded for days. She had believed in his dreams before the world even knew his name. And now he left her, bleeding, on a ballroom floor? No, not like this. Not ever. As the ambulance sped into the night, sirens wailing like a war cry, something shifted in Scarlet Reed. A spark, a flicker, a storm waiting to be born. The pain was still there, the fear, the disbelief, but alongside them now was fury. And that fury would change everything, because this wasn't just a wife betrayed, this was a woman reborn. And when she returned, she wouldn't be the same Scarlet who believed in fairy tales. She wouldn't smile politely while her husband paraded lies. She wouldn't be silenced by shame. She would rise. Scarlet Reed was not just another heartbroken woman in the headlines. She was the story. And the world had no idea what was coming next. Before the flashing cameras and shattered illusions, before the betrayal that shook the entire gala, Scarlet Reed was known for one thing: her grace. Not beauty, not wealth, not ambition. Grace. She had the kind of presence that didn't need sequins or red carpets. People noticed her because she listened, because she remembered birthdays, because she brought warmth into cold boardrooms and asked the assistant's name when no one else did. At 32, Scarlet was the kind of woman people underestimated until they couldn't. Born in a quiet suburb outside Seattle, Scarlet was raised by her grandmother, a retired teacher with a steel spine and a soft heart. Her mother had passed when she was 7. Her father was never in the picture. Life didn't hand her anything on a silver platter, so she built her own. She paid her way through college, waitressing at night and studying business administration by day. Not because she wanted to be rich, but because she wanted freedom. Freedom to choose who she'd become. Freedom to never depend on anyone. Scarlet never sought the spotlight. She wore department store blouses, never posted selfies, and thought luxury was Sunday mornings with a cup of coffee and no emails. She didn't dream of fame. She dreamed of peace. And then came Landon. She met him during her final semester at UCLA. He was 3 years older, already working on his second failed startup, charming the lecture hall as a guest speaker. He spoke about disruption, about breaking the system, about changing the world. He spoke like he meant it. After the talk, she asked him a question no one else dared. What if the system doesn't need breaking, just better builders? He paused, then smiled. Their story began with debates over coffee. He challenged her to dream bigger. She grounded him with facts and empathy. Where he saw markets, she saw people. They were opposites, but somehow they clicked. He asked her out 2 weeks later. Within 6 months, they moved in together. A year later, they launched his third company, together. Scarlet ran operations, hiring, and the books. Landon pitched to investors. He was the face, she was the foundation. They were unstoppable. And in love, or so she thought. Scarlet believed in loyalty. She believed in building something that lasted. So when Landon proposed on a rainy Thursday night with a handwritten note and a simple silver ring, she didn't hesitate. They got married in a small backyard ceremony. No glitz, just people who mattered. Back then, they didn't have much. Just ambition, sleepless nights, and shared dreams. Scarlet worked 80-hour weeks while pregnant with their first company, while Landon pursued meetings, funding, and headlines. She never complained, even when the IPO came and the world started calling him a genius, even when the mansion replaced their 2-bedroom apartment, even when strangers began to assume she was just the wife. She let it slide. She knew the truth. But over time, Landon changed. The man who used to read her rough drafts turned into the man who barely texted back. The man who once kissed her forehead every morning began to skip breakfast. He stopped asking about her. He stopped caring about her thoughts on anything that didn't end in dollar signs. Still, she stayed, because marriage is not a PR campaign. It's not about looking perfect, it's about enduring the imperfect. Or so she believed. Then came the baby. Scarlet had always wanted to be a mom. Not for the Instagrammable nursery or gender reveal parties, but for the real, messy, beautiful experience of raising a child with someone you love. At first, Landon was excited. He booked the best OBGYN in Beverly Hills, hired a personal chef, told reporters in interviews we're so excited, fatherhood is the next big adventure. But behind closed doors, he grew distant. He missed appointments, spent nights at work. His phone was always face down, always locked. Scarlet felt the shift, like being left out of your own story. She never said a word. She wanted to believe it was just pressure, stress, the usual growing pains of success, until the night of the gala. The night her world cracked wide open. The night Landon walked past her like a stranger. That's when Scarlet realized. She had spent years playing small so he could feel big. She had lowered her voice, dimmed her shine, disappeared into his shadow, all while carrying not just his child, but his legacy. But here's the thing about women like Scarlet Reed. They may be quiet, but they remember. They remember the sacrifices. They remember the broken promises, and when the time comes, they rise. Because Scarlet wasn't just a wife. She wasn't just a pregnant woman in heels. She was the architect of his empire. She was the brains behind his brilliance. She had files, emails, signatures. She knew things no one else did. Landon might have walked past her like she was nothing, but he'd soon learn what happens when a woman stops believing the lies. Scarlet Reed didn't need revenge. She needed a reckoning, and it was already on its way. The Bright Horizons Gala was the event of the year, an annual spectacle for the elite, the powerful, the painfully rich. Held at the Grand Monarch Hotel, the rooftop terrace shimmered under a glass dome strewn with thousands of tiny lights, mimicking the stars above. The air was scented with peonies imported from Kyoto, truffle canapes passed around on silver trays, and champagne poured from a literal fountain. Every inch of the space screamed money. Old money. New money. Dirty money. This was where tech moguls mingled with actors, where oil barons shook hands with senators, and where influencers faked smiles for brands they'd never use. It wasn't just a gala, it was theater. Every dress, every nod, every glass clinked was part of a carefully choreographed dance, designed to impress, intimidate, and influence. Scarlet had been to dozens of these events over the years. She helped build Landon's public image, attended networking luncheons, and hosted investors in their home. She knew how to work a room, knew what to wear, when to speak, when to disappear. But this year, everything was different. She was pregnant, visibly, and tired. She hadn't wanted to go. The baby had been restless all day, her back hurt, and the idea of standing in heels for hours surrounded by people pretending to care made her stomach turn. But Landon insisted. "It's important," he said that morning, barely looking up from his phone. "We can't have people whispering that you've vanished." So she went. She had her stylist steam a gown that still fit. Barely. A soft champagne silk with a cascading empire waist. She chose pearl earrings instead of diamonds. Did her own hair. Applied just enough blush to hide the nausea. She walked into that ballroom with her head held high. At first everything felt normal. She greeted familiar faces. Donors, CEOs, a senator's wife she'd once played tennis with. Everyone smiled politely, said the same thing. "You look amazing, Scarlet," glowing. She smiled back, like a robot. She looked for Landon. He wasn't there yet. People asked where he was, and she repeated the rehearsed line, "He's finishing up a call with investors. He'll be here soon." She took a glass of water from a passing waiter and found a quiet spot near the balcony. The skyline of Los Angeles stretched endlessly before her, glittering like the surface of a dream. Below, the city kept moving. Above, the elite drank and lied. And then it happened. The elevator chimed. Slowly, gracefully, the glass doors parted. Landon stepped out. The room shifted. People turned. Scarlet saw it before she understood it. The red, the dress, the woman. She didn't need to ask who she was. The way Landon stood next to her, arm around her waist, hand resting on her hip, smile wide and unbothered, told the whole story. Her name was Kendra Vale. A former model, current lifestyle advisor, and influencer with over 2 million followers. She was half Scarlet's age and known for posting photos in luxury resorts tagged self-made. Despite being sponsored by every man she dated, whispers erupted around the room. "Oh my God, is that his wife? No, that's not Scarlet. Isn't Scarlet pregnant?" Scarlet stood frozen, her water glass trembling in her hand. She watched as Landon laughed with Kendra, accepted handshakes from board members, posed for photos like nothing was wrong, like she didn't exist. He didn't even glance in her direction. That was the moment. Not when he kissed Kendra's cheek. Not when she touched his chest and leaned into him. Not even when he introduced her to investors as his partner. No, it was when he ignored her completely, as if she were invisible, that Scarlet's heart broke in a new way. Not from love, from realization. Landon Reed didn't just betray her, he erased her. She backed away from the balcony, breath catching in her throat. Her stomach twisted. The pain was sudden, sharp. The baby kicked. Something was wrong. She tried to speak but couldn't. The lights blurred. The chatter turned to static. She clutched her stomach and stumbled. That's when she collapsed. A gasp ran through the room. Scarlet's body hit the marble floor with a sickening thud. Her purse flew from her hand. Her gown soaked quickly in blood. Guests screamed. A woman fainted. Men backed away as if fear were contagious. Waiters dropped trays. The music stopped. "Call an ambulance." Someone knelt beside her. A stranger, a doctor maybe. Scarlet was semi-conscious. She heard voices. "She's pregnant." "Oh God, how far along?" 6 months, I think. Her lips moved. "Barely. My baby. Save." As the medics arrived, Landon still hadn't moved. He stood near the champagne tower, Kendra whispering something in his ear. He didn't even look. He didn't run. He didn't kneel. He turned and walked away, left the gala, left his wife, left his unborn child. 42 floors below, Scarlett was loaded into the ambulance. Her hands gripped her belly. Her eyes fluttered shut, but something inside her stayed awake. A fire. This was no longer just about betrayal. This was about survival. Scarlett Reed had walked into that gala as a woman trying to hold her family together. She would leave it as a woman with nothing left to lose. And that kind of woman? She's the most dangerous of all. Landon Reed didn't start out as a villain. He started as a dreamer. Born to a middle-class family in Arizona, he was the youngest of 3 and the only boy. His father worked construction. His mother juggled 2 jobs. Landon grew up watching people struggle, save every dime, and settle for just enough. But he wanted more, much more. From a young age, he knew the power of image. He wasn't the smartest in school, but he was charming. Teachers gave him second chances. Girls swooned. Adults believed in his potential. And Landon learned quickly. Confidence was currency. Appearance was everything. By 25, Landon had moved to LA and launched his first startup, a budgeting app that crashed within 6 months. But the failure didn't faze him. He pivoted fast, used his losses as a badge of honor, and started a second company. That one failed too. But each time, he learned how to talk better, look better, sell better. Then came Scarlett. She believed in him before anyone else did. She edited his pitches, cleaned up his messes, stayed up all night formatting proposals while he schmoozed venture capitalists at rooftop bars. She was the backbone of his early success. And for a while, he loved her. Not just for her loyalty, but because she grounded him. Scarlett reminded him of where he came from, and the man he once wanted to be. But that was before the money, before the fame, before the investors and Forbes interviews and private jets. As Landon's face started appearing in magazines and on tech panels, something shifted. The man who once counted every dollar now spent thousands on tailored suits and teeth whitening. He hired a personal brand strategist. His Instagram was curated to look effortless, but expensive. He started referring to Scarlett not as his partner, but as my wife, a title that sounded more like an accessory than a relationship. She was no longer the woman he brainstormed with on the floor of their one-bedroom apartment. She had become background noise, predictable, quiet, safe, and Landon didn't want safe anymore. He wanted power, admiration, aesthetic perfection. Then, like a storm in stilettos, Kendra Vale arrived. They met at a networking party for digital creators. Kendra was magnetic, confident, sharp, and stunning. She wasn't impressed by Landon's resume. She was impressed by his reach, his following, his relevance. That was what seduced him. Kendra spoke in headlines. She knew how to turn a champagne toast into a branding moment. She took curated selfies with his logo subtly in the background. She pushed him into rooms Scarlett never would have. Fashion weeks, celebrity fundraisers, yacht parties hosted by crypto kings. With Kendra, Landon felt like a god. And that's what scared him most. Because even though Scarlett had been there for the rise, she wasn't made for the top. At least that's what he told himself. She doesn't get it, he vented to his assistant one day. She still shops at places with coupons. The assistant didn't reply, just nodded. And so the emotional betrayal began long before the physical one. Landon started hiding messages, creating fake business trips, changing passwords. He told himself it was temporary, just fun, something that made him feel alive again. But Kendra knew how to play the long game. She made Landon believe that Scarlett was holding him back, that being a father would ruin his momentum, that he was meant for more, and she could help him get there. Slowly, subtly, Kendra erased Scarlett from his world. She threw out old photos, blocked Scarlett's name on Landon's phone during meetings, even encouraged him to attend therapy, not to fix things with Scarlett, but to justify leaving her. When Scarlett got pregnant, Landon panicked. He smiled for the cameras, told the press he was thrilled, but deep inside, he was furious. This wasn't the plan. A baby meant settling down, slowing down. It meant diapers instead of DMs, bottles instead of branding. Kendra didn't push him to stay. She offered him something else, freedom. "She'll be fine," Kendra whispered. "You can still be a great dad, later." And Landon believed her. He told himself Scarlett was strong, that she'd bounce back, that the public didn't need to know about their issues. But the truth? He didn't want to deal with it. He was too busy being the man Kendra molded, the image he spent years chasing. He had finally become the icon people wrote think pieces about, and Scarlett didn't fit in that frame anymore. That's why he didn't stop when he saw her at the gala. That's why he didn't kneel when she collapsed. That's why he didn't ride in the ambulance. Because villains rarely realize they're villains. To Landon, he was still the hero of his story, the man who built himself from nothing, the man with the brilliant mind and million-dollar smile. He didn't see the blood on the marble floor. He didn't hear the desperation in Scarlett's voice. He didn't care. Because narcissists don't grieve, they rebrand. While Scarlett fought for her life in a hospital bed, Landon updated his bio. While doctors fought to save the baby, he filmed a podcast about the mindset of winners. While the city whispered, Landon posted drone footage of him and Kendra drinking champagne on a helicopter pad. But what he didn't know, what he never saw coming, was that the woman he discarded wasn't just broken, she was building. And when she returned, it wouldn't be with tears, it would be with power. Because the story was never about him. It was about the woman he underestimated. It was supposed to be a moment of celebration. The Bright Horizons Gala had reached its peak. The live auction was in full swing. The jazz band played softly in the background, and the rooftops sparkled like a movie set. Scarlett had spent the last 30 minutes faking smiles and small talk, her feet aching and her stomach tightening. Where was Landon? She had texted him twice. Are you here? Did you make it upstairs? No reply. Then, the elevator doors opened. She turned instinctively, expecting to see her husband, the man who promised to be by her side tonight. But what stepped out instead broke something inside her. Landon Reed, tall, sharp, confident, and on his arm, Kendra Vale. The woman was breathtaking, if not by beauty, then by audacity. Her crimson dress was cut high, dipped low, and screamed for attention. But what made Scarlett's breath stop wasn't the dress. It was the way Kendra clung to Landon like she owned him. And the way Landon let her. They walked in like a headline. Power couple arrives, and the crowd responded as expected. Gasps, double takes, whispers. Phones were discreetly lifted for photos. PR assistants tried to make sense of what was happening. Nobody had prepared for this. Because everyone knew Landon was married. Everyone knew Scarlett. And yet, no one stopped him. Scarlett stood motionless as the room seemed to spin around her. She could feel dozens of eyes bouncing between her and Kendra, comparing, judging, calculating. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, her child kicking lightly in response. A server passed with a tray of champagne. She reached out for the glass with a trembling hand, but pulled back. She didn't need alcohol. She needed answers. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. Scarlett walked, no, floated, across the gala floor, her heels sharp against the polished marble. Guests parted for her like waves. Some tried to smile. Some avoided eye contact, but they all knew what was about to happen. Kendra saw her first. She turned, red lips curling into a smirk. "Oh," she said aloud, as if spotting an old acquaintance. "Scarlett, you look glowing." Scarlett's gaze didn't leave Landon. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like," she said quietly, voice trembling but steady enough to slice through the noise. Landon didn't flinch. "I didn't think you were coming tonight," he said. Scarlett's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's your answer?" He shrugged slightly, as if trying to remain neutral. "Let's not do this here." "Do what?" she asked, raising her voice just enough. "Acknowledge your wife or your child." Gasps. Again. Someone dropped a glass. A few turned away out of politeness or shame. Others kept watching. This was better than the entertainment. "I didn't want to cause a scene," Landon muttered. "Too late," Scarlett replied. "You caused the scene the moment you brought your mistress to a gala I was co-hosting." Kendra stepped forward. "I think you're being dramatic." "Don't," Scarlett snapped, turning toward her. You knew he was married, you knew I was pregnant, and you still came here wearing that." Kendra blinked. No response. Scarlett turned back to Landon, tears welling in her eyes but refusing to fall. "I stayed home for months while you traveled with her. I gave up my career, my identity, to build your company. I carried your child quietly while you chased hashtags and models." He tried to speak, but she cut him off. "You don't get to rewrite the story. Not tonight, not in front of them. A spotlight operator, sensing something bigger than the event, subtly angled the light toward them. Now the entire room was watching. Landon shifted uncomfortably. "Scarlett, we can talk about this." "No," she said firmly. "You don't get to talk anymore." And then, something inside her shifted. A pain, sharp, deep. She gasped, hand going to her stomach. The baby kicked hard. Her legs buckled. "Scarlett!" someone shouted. She collapsed to her knees. The room erupted. Screams, running footsteps, someone calling 911. Blood pooled beneath her. The last thing she saw was Landon standing still, frozen, staring at her like a problem he didn't know how to fix, and Kendra backing away, as if being too close might stain her. Scarlett reached for her stomach. "Please, my baby." And then everything went black. When she woke up, it was sterile white, beeping monitors, the scent of antiseptic. Her throat was dry, her head heavy. She tried to sit up. A nurse rushed over. "You're safe. You're at Cedars-Sinai. You lost a lot of blood, but the baby's okay." Tears slipped from Scarlett's eyes. Relief, gratitude, pain. Is he here?" she asked weakly. The nurse paused. "Do you mean your husband?" Scarlett nodded. "No," the nurse said gently. "He left before the ambulance arrived. He hasn't come by." Scarlett turned her face to the wall, and she knew this was no longer a marriage, it was a war. And she would not lose. The hospital room was quiet, too quiet. The only sounds were the soft, steady beeping of machines and the distant murmur of nurses at the station outside. The walls were sterile white, the lighting cold and clinical. But for Scarlett Reed, the silence was deafening. She stared at the ceiling, blank and unmoving. Her hands rested gently on her stomach, now swaddled in medical fabric and IV lines. The baby was okay, that's what they told her. Stable. But Scarlett felt anything but. She was numb. She didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't ask questions because there was no one to ask them to. Landon hadn't come. Not a call, not a text, not a single inquiry from the man whose child she was carrying. The same man who, just hours earlier, stood across from her in a room full of strangers and watched her collapse without flinching. The betrayal played over in her head like a cruel film on loop. His cold eyes, her blood on the floor, Kendra's smirk, the whispers, the pity in people's voices. Poor Scarlett, she didn't even see it coming. She looked so tired. She was tired. Bone deep, soul-crushing tired. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. She tried to sleep, but every time her eyes shut, the images returned. The sound of her own scream, the pressure in her abdomen, the feel of the floor hitting her knees, and Landon just standing there, like none of it mattered. The next morning, a nurse named April brought in a tray of oatmeal and fruit. "You should try to eat," she said kindly, placing the tray near her bed. Scarlett didn't respond. April hesitated, then sat down in the chair beside her. "You know, I've been working here for 8 years, she said softly, "and I've seen a lot of women come through these doors, but not one of them deserved to be left alone, especially not like this." Scarlett turned her head slowly. Their eyes met. That's when the tears came. Silent, relentless, a dam finally breaking. April reached for her hand. "I don't know your story," she said, "but I know you're still here, and that means something." Scarlett sobbed. Not for Landon, not even for Kendra. She cried for herself, for the version of her that believed in love, for the woman who traded her ambition for his dreams, for the girl who trusted promises and waited by the door. She cried until her chest hurt, until her voice cracked, until her body gave out and sleep finally overtook her. Over the next few days, Scarlett remained in the hospital. No visitors, no flowers, no press statements. Landon and Kendra had gone silent on social media. No posts, no photos, no explanations. The media tried to spin it. Landon Reed attends gala alone, mystery companion sparks rumors. But insiders knew, everyone knew, and still, Scarlett said nothing. Her lawyers reached out quietly, so did her publicist. Her assistant offered to resign out of embarrassment. Scarlett ignored them all, because she didn't know who she was anymore. She wasn't a wife, not really. She wasn't a CEO. Landon had taken over the business side. She wasn't even a public figure, not the kind people cared to protect. She was just a headline. Billionaire's pregnant wife collapses at gala. Clickbait, gossip. And in those long, lonely hours in the hospital room, Scarlett spiraled. She stopped eating, stopped responding. When the nurses spoke, she barely acknowledged them. She stared at the wall for hours. Somewhere in the background, the world kept spinning. News cycles moved on. Another celebrity scandal. A viral dance challenge, a tech stock crash. But Scarlett stayed frozen in time until the letter came. It was left on her bedside table while she slept. No name, no return address, just a single cream envelope, sealed in gold wax. Scarlett opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten note. Scarlett, I heard what happened. I know you're in pain, but this moment is not the end of you. It's the beginning. Let them count you out. Let them mock you. Let them write your obituary, then rise. Because I've seen what you're capable of, and you don't need him. You never did. E.B. Scarlett stared at the signature. E.B. Ethan Blackwell. An old friend. A name she hadn't heard in years. A man who once stood beside her during the early days of Landon's first startup. A silent investor. A private billionaire who vanished from the spotlight to build an empire overseas. And now, he knew. He had seen. He still believed in her. Something inside her shifted. It wasn't strength. Not yet, but it was something. A spark. Scarlett folded the note and tucked it beneath her pillow. That night, she asked the nurse for a mirror. She hadn't looked at herself in days. The woman staring back was pale, hollow-eyed, worn. But there was something else too, a quiet fire. The next morning, she asked for her laptop. Then she asked for her lawyer because Scarlett Reed may have been broken, but broken things can be rebuilt. And this time, she wouldn't be doing it for Landon. She'd be doing it for herself, and for the child growing inside her. 3 days after Scarlett Reed left the hospital, the world still didn't know what she was planning. No paparazzi spotted her, no Instagram updates, no statements to the press. Her phone was off. Her apartment, empty. Friends and former colleagues assumed she was healing or hiding. But behind closed doors, Scarlett wasn't grieving. She was gathering. Every document, every email, every file she'd been quietly archiving for years. Scarlett Reed was not just the wife of a billionaire. She was the blueprint. And now the world would know. It started with an old external hard drive stored at the back of her home office, covered in dust, forgotten behind a row of business books. Inside were years of records, early contracts, investor decks, private emails between her and Landon during the foundation of Reed Tech. Documents that proved it wasn't Landon who wrote the first pitch that landed their seed funding, it was Scarlett. That it wasn't Landon who identified the original market fit, it was Scarlett. That the patent filed in Landon's name, she drafted the prototype, and she had the timestamps to prove it. For years, she'd kept quiet, out of love, out of loyalty, out of fear. But now, there was nothing left to fear. Landon had burned the bridge. Now she would use the ashes. Scarlett's first call was to her lawyer, Mia Sullivan, a shark in a silk blouse, and one of the few people Scarlett trusted without hesitation. "I'm ready," Scarlett said. Mia didn't even blink. "Let's take everything." They worked through the night. By morning, Mia had filed a motion to freeze several of Landon's shared assets. Not just cash, branding rights, IP ownership, licensing deals. Then came the emails, strategic leaks to industry insiders, whispering that Scarlett had been the real architect all along. She didn't need to go public. Not yet. She let curiosity do the work. Soon, people started digging. Forbes editors, business bloggers, Reddit threads. They uncovered old photo footage of Scarlett at early meetings, emails referencing her name in critical code decisions, voice memos where Landon credited her ideas. The narrative started shifting. She wasn't just his wife, she was his partner. Why did he hide her contributions? Then, on a quiet Thursday morning, the twist became public. Scarlett's name appeared in a leaked financial document, one showing she owned 51% of the original Reed Tech shares. Not Landon, not the board. The shares had been held under a trust, quietly built and maintained during the early years before Landon's fame exploded. And now, she controlled it. Landon didn't see it coming. When his CFO stormed into his office and tossed the printed statement onto his desk, his jaw clenched. "What the hell is this?" "She owns controlling interest," the CFO said. "She's filed to reclaim her board seat. She's initiating a vote to remove you as CEO." Landon laughed. "She wouldn't." "She already did." Silence. Landon sat down, stunned. She didn't know. She knew everything. Meanwhile, Scarlett was already 3 steps ahead. She flew to New York under an alias, stayed at a private residence owned by, of all people, Ethan Blackwell, the billionaire who had once believed in her before anyone else. Now he offered her more than shelter. He offered his network, CEOs, strategists, analysts. I can fund your own tech group, he said. Make you the face, build something that's yours. But Scarlett shook her head. No, I don't want something new. I want back what's mine. That night, she sat in front of the mirror and did something she hadn't done in months. She smiled, not because she had won, but because for the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again. 2 days later, Landon held a press conference. He stood at a podium in his usual designer suit, fake humility in his eyes. Kendra stood behind him, silent but smug. I want to address the rumors, he said. Scarlett and I have chosen to take time apart. I respect her privacy. As for Reed Tech, I am still committed to innovation and leadership. The doors burst open, all heads turned. Scarlett walked in. In a tailored navy coat, no makeup, hair slicked into a bun. She didn't need styling, she was power. She stepped up beside Landon, whispered something in his ear. He went pale. Then she turned to the press. My name is Scarlett Reed, she said, co-founder of Reed Tech, former chief strategy officer, the woman who built this company while her husband chased interviews. The gasp. I've been silent for too long, but silence doesn't mean absence, and from today forward I reclaim what was taken. Reporters scrambled for questions. Landon stood speechless. Kendra stepped back, suddenly unsure. Scarlett finished with one final line. I may have been written out of the first chapter, but I'll be the author of the rest. And with that, she walked out. Head high, baby safe, legacy intact. The day Scarlett Reed stepped back into the world, she wasn't the same woman who collapsed on a marble floor. The hospital gown was gone. So were the soft pastels, the hesitant eyes, the anxious posture. In their place stood a woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece, with clarity, precision, and steel in her spine. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took weeks of silence, of reflection, of Leah. But it began with a choice. Scarlett didn't want revenge anymore. She wanted results. She started by reclaiming her identity, not the version created by Landon's PR team, but the real Scarlett, the strategist, the builder, the woman who once helped launch a company from a kitchen table with nothing but a borrowed laptop and a $10 coffee budget. She restructured her calendar. No more open slots for other people's priorities. She changed her email signature. Founder, visionary, survivor. She hired a new stylist, not for glamour, but for armor. No more floaty dresses, no more soft wife aesthetics. Now it was tailored suits, monochrome power, black heels, minimal makeup, hair tied tight, revealing every angle of her face because she had nothing to hide. She even changed her perfume. No more vanilla. Now it was leather and oud. When she walked into a room, people felt her presence before she spoke, and when she did speak, people listened. Scarlett didn't return to Reed Tech with apologies. She returned with proof. She entered the boardroom wearing navy, holding binders, flanked by her attorney and 2 private investigators. Her tone was measured, calm, unshakable. I'm not asking to be heard, she said. I'm demanding to be restored. Some board members squirmed. Others stayed silent. But none of them challenged her. She had facts, receipts, and leverage. 2 days later, Landon was removed as acting CEO in a 5-2 vote. He didn't take it well. He blamed everyone, his staff, his assistant, even Kendra. But deep down, he knew the truth. Scarlett didn't just take her power back. She made it undeniable. Meanwhile, the world noticed. Women across industries started resharing her old interviews. Magazines requested cover shoots. The same bloggers who once called her just a wife were now labeling her tech's silent queen. Scarlett declined every interview request. Not out of fear. Out of focus. She didn't need to talk. She was busy building. With Ethan Blackwell's backing, she launched a foundation for women in entrepreneurship, starting with survivors of domestic manipulation, financial control, and high-profile erasure. She called it the Rewrite Fund. Its motto? Take the pen back. Within days, donations poured in. Not from the rich, from everyday women who saw themselves in Scarlett, a nurse in Ohio, a startup founder in Berlin, a single mother in Brazil. They all wrote the same message. Thank you for standing up. But Scarlett knew this wasn't just about her. This was about changing the system. The one that made women question their worth when they stepped out of a man's shadow. She began speaking at universities, not about tech, but about rebirth. One evening, at a packed auditorium at Stanford, a student raised her hand and asked, what was the hardest part of starting over? Scarlett paused, then answered softly, letting go of the version of myself who accepted so little. Silence. Then thunderous applause. After that, everyone wanted her. Panels, keynotes, investment forums, but Scarlett remained selective. Because for the first time in her life, she understood her value wasn't in her availability. It was in her vision, and her baby, her child, was part of that vision. She brought the baby to meetings, not to prove a point, but because she could, because motherhood and leadership were not opposites, they were power, multiplied. Meanwhile, Landon spiraled. His image took hit after hit. Kendra dumped him within a month, claiming she was manipulated. Investors pulled out. A Forbes article titled "The Fall of a Tech Icon" went viral, featuring a side-by-side of Scarlett's comeback and Landon's collapse. Public sentiment shifted. The man who once stood on magazine covers was now a cautionary tale. And Scarlett? She didn't say a word. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to, because power doesn't announce itself. It walks in, quietly, and takes a seat at the head of the table. One morning, nearly 6 months after the gala, Scarlett stood in front of a mirror in her Manhattan apartment. She held her baby, now smiling, strong, full of life. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled too. Not out of survival, but out of certainty. She had done it. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her silence into strategy, her wounds into weapons. Scarlett Reed had returned, but she was no longer just a woman recovering from betrayal. She was the storm, the system, the rewrite, and she was just getting started. The invitation arrived in a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold foil. It was for the Genesis Awards Gala, an annual black tie event where the richest of the rich toasted to their own greatness. Scarlett used to attend with Landon back when they were still seen as the power couple of West Coast tech. But this year was different. This year, Scarlett would attend alone. Correction, not alone, on her own. When she stepped out of the car onto the red carpet, cameras exploded in flashes. Reporters scrambled, nearly tripping over themselves to capture her entrance. Scarlett wore an all-black custom gown, sleek, structured, paired with stilettos sharp enough to wound. Her hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, diamond drop earrings grazing her collarbone. On her left wrist, no ring. On her right hand, her baby's name engraved on a delicate platinum bracelet. She didn't pose. She didn't smile. She walked with purpose. The whispers followed instantly. That's Scarlett Reed. She looks different. She looks like a CEO. Inside, the ballroom glittered with excess, champagne towers, live orchestras, chandeliers the size of cars. Landon was already there, of course, center table, surrounded by investors trying not to look nervous. He turned when he saw her. And for the first time in his life, he looked afraid. Scarlett walked directly past him, ignoring his stunned stare. She took her seat near the stage, next to Ethan Blackwell and 2 Fortune 500 female founders. Not a word was exchanged between Scarlett and Landon. Not yet. That would come later. Halfway through the evening, the MC took the stage. And now, the final award of the night, the Visionary Leader Award. For someone who not only changed the landscape of technology, but redefined what leadership looks like. Scarlett raised an eyebrow. She wasn't listed in the program. The MC smiled. This year, by unanimous vote, the board has chosen someone whose resilience, innovation, and impact has reached far beyond tech. A woman who rose from betrayal, claimed her place, and is rewriting the rules for everyone. Landon paled. Scarlett's name was called. The room exploded in applause. Landon didn't clap. Kendra, seated 2 tables away with her latest sponsor, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Scarlett stood and walked to the stage. The mic waited. The room fell silent. She took a deep breath and began. 6 months ago, I was lying on a hospital bed, bleeding, alone, betrayed. My marriage was collapsing. My name was erased from the company I helped build, and no one believed I'd come back from it. A pause. But pain is fuel. Silence is strategy. And being underestimated, that's leverage. Applause. I didn't come here to thank anyone for this award. I came here to remind every woman in this room, especially the ones who've been pushed aside, talked over, and written out, that your story isn't finished until you write the ending yourself. The crowd stood. Scarlett smiled. Rewrite it loud. Mic drop, standing ovation. But Scarlett wasn't done yet. As people returned to their seats, the screen behind the stage flickered to life. A surprise video began to play. Landon's voice, from a private boardroom meeting months ago. Scarlett doesn't matter anymore. She's just the mother of my kid. I'm the one with the company, the face. She can cry to her lawyers all she wants. Gasps, whispers turned to outrage. Scarlett didn't look away from the screen. She let the video play. Clips of Landon bragging to his inner circle, mocking her, laughing about the gala incident, even referring to the baby as a setback. And then, silence. Dead silence. Scarlett stepped forward again. That recording, she said calmly, was taken by a whistleblower on Landon's own advisory team. Someone who realized that silence enables abuse. She scanned the room. Tonight is not about humiliation. It's about truth. And the truth is, too many women stay quiet to protect men like him. Landon stood up. This is slander, he barked. You're done. Scarlett didn't blink. She turned to the crowd. Funny, she said. That's exactly what he told me. Right before I took 51% of the company. Laughter. Applause. Someone shouted, Tell him, Queen. Landon stormed out, but the story had already been rewritten. By morning, clips of Scarlett's speech trended on every platform. Hashtag Rewrite It Loud went viral. Women from around the world posted their own stories of betrayal, survival, and reclamation. The Rewrite Fund's website crashed from traffic. Book deals, TV offers, a biopic. Scarlett turned most of them down because she didn't need validation. She had her voice. And now the world was listening. Later that night, as she stepped into the back seat of her black car, Scarlett took a deep breath. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked. She looked down at her phone. A message from Mia, her lawyer, read, Board vote passed. You're officially CEO. She smiled. Home, she said, to my son. Because the real victory wasn't the applause. It was the fact that her baby would grow up knowing his mother wasn't broken. She was unstoppable. 6 months after the gala that changed everything, Scarlett Reed stood on the balcony of her penthouse apartment, holding her son in her arms. The city stretched beneath her. A skyline of lights, stories, ambition. Just like her. The baby cooed softly, his tiny hand gripping her necklace, unaware of the war his mother had fought to bring him into a world where she stood tall, alone, but never lonely. Scarlett smiled. She had survived the unthinkable. But more than that, she had transformed it. She had taken betrayal and built something new, a legacy, not one tied to Landon's name, her own. Scarlett had become more than a woman who was left behind. She had become a symbol, a movement, and not because she wanted it, because the world needed it. Her phone buzzed. A new article. Scarlett Reed named Time Woman of the Year. She put it aside. Awards were nice, but they were never the point. The point was rewriting the rules. And not just for herself. For every woman who had ever been silenced, sidelined, or shamed for believing in love, for daring to hope, for giving everything only to be left with nothing. She thought about that night. Bleeding on marble, alone, how far she'd come. How far she still wanted to go. Because power, she realized, isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It moves with purpose. It listens. It rebuilds. At the Rewrite Fund's headquarters, hundreds of letters lined the walls. Stories from women across the globe. A girl in South Africa who left her abusive boss and launched her own jewelry business. A woman in India who took her ex-husband to court and won back custody of her kids. A single mom in Chicago who started a coding boot camp for young girls. They all wrote the same thing. You gave me permission to believe again. Scarlett didn't take credit. She gave it back. You had the strength all along, she told them. You just needed a match. I'm not your savior. I'm your reflection. She returned to the hospital where it all began, not as a patient, as a speaker. Standing before a crowd of nurses, doctors, and young women expecting their first child, she told her story, not with tears, but with triumph. Triumph. I thought I had to lose everything to find myself, she said. But I didn't. I had to lose what was never mine to begin with. Gasps, nods, a few wiped tears. One young girl approached her after. How did you know when to stop forgiving? She asked. Scarlett paused. When I realized I wasn't healing, I was hiding. The girl hugged her. Scarlett hugged her back. She visited her grandmother's grave next, brought flowers, her baby, and a letter. Thank you for teaching me what strength really looks like, she whispered. You didn't raise a nice girl. You raised a woman who could walk through fire. The wind was gentle that day. Scarlett stood there a long time. No cameras, no applause, just the woman she was, and the women who came before her. Later that evening, she sat in her office, baby asleep nearby, writing her first book. Unwritten, How I Took the Pen Back. Not a memoir, A manifesto. Not about Landon, about life. Each chapter opened with a question. What would you do if no one told you no? No. What would you build if you believed you were worthy? What would you leave behind if you weren't afraid to be seen walking away? She didn't sugarcoat anything. She wrote about the blood, the fear, the shame, but also the fire, the strategy, the reclaiming. Because fairy tales aren't real. But reinvention? That's a story she knew by heart. Scarlett didn't fall in love again. Not yet. She dated. She laughed. She let herself be wanted, but not owned. Because love wasn't her ending. It was her beginning. And next time, she wouldn't shrink to fit someone else's spotlight. She would shine on her own. And as the seasons changed, so did the headlines. No longer scorned wife. Now it was visionary. Mother. Architect. Reclaimer. Scarlett Reed. She didn't respond to gossip, didn't clap back. She let her actions write louder. She let her silence be strategic. And when asked what advice she had for women watching her story unfold, she said only this. Never let someone convince you your story ends with them. Because it doesn't. It begins with you, with the woman staring back in the mirror, with the voice you're still learning to trust, with the fire you thought you lost. It was never gone, just waiting. Waiting for you to stop apologizing, to stop shrinking, to stop whispering, and to finally stand up and say, I'm not broken. I'm the author, and this story isn't over. Not by a long shot. So the story has ended. Our wonderful friends, are you still here until now? If you're still watching, maybe something in Scarlett's journey stirred something deep inside you. Maybe it reminded you of your own moments of heartbreak, silence, or being underestimated. But here's the truth. Your story doesn't end with betrayal. It begins with your decision to reclaim it. Scarlett Reed's story is not just about pain, it's about the rebirth that happens after the collapse. As the saying from heterodoxism goes, a wound is where the light enters you. Let that light in. Let it guide you toward becoming the version of yourself that doesn't shrink, doesn't apologize, doesn't wait for permission. If this story moved you, don't just keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And tell us in the comments, what are you ready to rewrite in your life? Your voice matters. Your story matters. Let's rewrite it. Loud.